What if Will Byers took Eleven's place in the very first episode of Stranger Things? I think I just cooked down on this theory. Let me explain. So one of the biggest questions that we have in Stranger Things is, why Will? Why was it that in the very first episode of Stranger Things, Will gets taken? Clearly, from what we've learned, there was a reason as to why Will specifically was picked. But what if it was actually never meant to be him? What if he was a replacement for 11? Let me explain. In the very first episode of Stranger Things, we get a sequence in which Will, basically, biking home, sees a Demogorgon on the road, goes home, he hides in his house, and the lock to his house, slides open. We know, Duffer's confirmed, Demogorgons don't have telepathic or psychic abilities, right? They can't do that. They can't open the deadbolt to the house. So someone else must have. Now, a lot of people have hypothesized it's probably Vecna. But what if it was actually 11 instead? I believe that after 11 gets out of Hawkins' lab, because we know she breaks out or whatever, she crawls through that little tunnel thing, and she hides in the Byers' shed. There are a couple things that point to this that I just want to mention. First of all, okay guys, under further inspection, what I say in this clip is #wrong. So instead I'm gonna mention Hopper, when he goes and investigates the shed, the Byers' shed, I think it's in the second episode, there is a sleeping bag in the shed. And there's a deleted scene, or whatever, delete something from the script, apparently, reportedly, a scene in which he finds a sleeping bag in the shed. That doesn't exist in the actual series. However, there is a sleeping bag in the shed. I forgot that he didn't actually find one, but there's a sleeping bag in there. Maybe that's where 11 slept. Second of all, when Will runs out to go to the shed, the light in the shed is already on. His mom is at home. Jonathan's at home. Who turned on the light in the shed? Who turned on the light? Maybe. As we know, Demogorgons go after blood. Why would they have chased after Will if Will was not bleeding? For some reason, they chased him back to his house where the lock on the door opens. Now, what if? I'm not saying it wasn't Vecna who took Will in the shed. I think it was Vecna in the shed, but I think the person who opened the door was 11. Now, hear me out here, okay? I love 11. Before I say this, no 11 hate my comment sections, okay? Because at the end of the day, she was an 11-year-old, mentally 7-year-old girl, okay? She sees Will get home. She's like, uh-oh. She opens the door so it'll get Will while she runs away. Now, hear me out here. Just think about it, right? She's on survival mode. It would make sense for her, while she's running from this thing, to, I'm not gonna lie, take someone down, right? If she opens that door, she can get away. So she opens it so it'll go after Will, and she runs. That would also explain why, I think it's in episode 2 or 3 of season 1, she just mysteriously knows what Will looks like. Mike has a picture that she then points to and goes, how do you know that? How do you know that? She, at that point, should not have known what Will looks like. Now, when you first watch the series, that detail kind of goes unnoticed, because it's okay, well, she has psychic abilities, yeah. But as the series has progressed, we know her abilities, we know what she can do. So how did she know? There is no reason as to why she would have known what Will looked like, right? So maybe she saw Will when Will got back to his house when she was hiding in his shed. Then, Will goes out to the shed, he has the gun, and we see the light flare. I think that's I think it was Vecna who took Will, but I don't think it was supposed to be Will in that shed. It was supposed to be 11 in that shed. And she basically baited that motherfucker. Let's say the Demogorgon is chasing after, right? Or spots 11, thinks that 11's going in here. When she opens the door, that gives her an exit, or an opportunity for Will to go run into the shed while she runs away from the shed. So she basically baits and switch them so that they get Will instead. Now you might be thinking, well, if it was after 11, then why did they stop, why was it just Will, right? Because Will and 11, very different. Hear me out here. I think part of it was for 11's psychic ability. That would explain why they were going after her specifically, why Vecna has a motive to go after 11. Primarily, her powers. But hear me out. This ties in with the Will Byers gets power theory. Somehow, with Vecna taking Will into the Upside Down, it's supposed to be 11, it's Will. However he does it, somehow Will gains powers. Which means Vecna doesn't need 11 anymore. Which would explain why he stops chasing after 11. They would explain why it was supposed to be 11. But somehow, through the process of taking him to maybe it was Dimension X, maybe whatever it was, somehow, through the process of taking him, he gains powers too. Which means Vecna no longer needs 11 for this. He has Will. It would explain why a random-ass kid was the one. It would explain why they chased after him, why they got him specifically, because there was no motive, there was no specific reason that we know of so far for them to get Will. But there is one for 11, there's a connection there. It would explain why it's noted so many times, oh, is that a boy? This boy broke into my kitchen. Why are they comparing 11 to a boy so much? It could tie back to all the times that 11 has said, oh, I felt like the monster all along, I was the monster all along, right? It would explain why Will has no recollection of this, no memory of this. If he has powers, he has no idea that he has powers. But that would explain why, let's just say, here's the thing, okay? I think no matter what, inarguably, it was Vecna who took Will in the shed. But after that, he was just in the Upside Down. You're telling me he was able to run from Vecna in the Upside Down for a week? Huh? Maybe it was because whatever happened in that shed, Will gets taken, Will gets powers, Will lets out some kind of power, whatever it was, and Vecna goes, I need that. So that's why Will got away. Are we hearing what I'm saying here? But primarily, the idea is that it was never meant to be Will. It was supposed to be 11 in that shed, and by her opening that door, she basically, whatever she did, I think she was the catalyst for why it then took Will instead. And Will was her replacement when he gained powers. It would explain why there are so many parallels between Will and 11, especially if they reveal at the end it was always the two of them, because the two of them weren't, right? There has to be further expansion on it, because of the fact that when 11 gets out of that lab, we don't see any clips of her actually running until she gets to Benny's Burgers. That's the first time that we see her, I'm pretty sure. I'm fairly confident that's like the first time we actually see a clip of her after whatever happened in there, how she got out and stuff, right? There was a gap of time in between when she got out, presumably, and when everything happened. I think whatever happened on the night that Will got taken, whatever happened, it was basically, it was meant to be 11, she escaped, she hid, they swapped places, and Will gained powers, which made him take 11's role. That's what got the buyers involved, that's what got everyone else involved, that's the catalyst for the story. Oh, you can tie that back to Will's connection to femininity. The fact that he took a girl's place. He was supposed to be 11, and you had Will replace him in that entire, oh my god. His entire backstory and like trauma around this idea of like him being too feminine, him like having these effeminate traits, and the fact that he then took the place of a girl, the idea that it just happens to you, you can't avoid it. How that relates back to queerness, like it's not a choice. You could do anything you want, you could try so hard to not have that happen, but it still happens. How that relates back to the idea of Esset. I'm reaching the fucking flow state. And the connection that can then have back to Mike and Will's relationship with the fact that 11 took Will's place as Mike's romantic interest. Like maybe that will be the connection back to that, because of the fact that they have this love triangle going on. Maybe it was never supposed to be 11. It was supposed to be Will, but then 11 took his place by effectively taking his life. But maybe the conclusion of that will be everything going back to its right place. The right side up. Again, 11 having that idea and that the repeated concept of, what if I was the monster all along? What if she was the monster all along? What if she was the reason this happened and she doesn't even know? How that relates back to 11's character and the entire premise of like trying to find herself. Her gaining autonomy, her gaining her own life, but at the cost of taking another child's childhood. Am I crazy? I sound like Joyce right now, huh? And maybe people have already like hypothesized this already, but that's just what I'm thinking after rewatching that first episode and seeing that interview where the Duffers like talked about that opening scene, because it made me think, well, why, we know it wasn't a Demogorgon, but what if it wasn't Vecna? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if I sound delusional and crazy right now, but I genuinely think it was meant to be her. I think it was meant to be her. And I think that explains why there's no explanation as to why it was Will, what happened. I don't think it was ever meant to be him. Get me my degree.